Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Josh Rich. I am the host of the Champions Corner, and with me today, I'm honored to have Ruthann Weeks. Ruthann, how's it going?
It's going really well, Josh. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, welcome. So, Ruthann, we've had the opportunity to speak before, but I think with this month, the month of March being Women's History Month, I just would like to know, in your opinion, your perspective, why is that so important to you?
Being a woman in business, I've had this paradigm that I've had to overcome that we have to work twice as hard to be thought half as good. And it's absolutely bull crap, but it's a widely held belief that many women have. And you know what? It's really, really important. I think that the time is now. We see women rising up all over the place as leaders. And it's just nice to be able to acknowledge that with a special time and to support each other. International Women's Day was just this week as well,
Right.
and it's really awesome to see women supporting women. And yeah, I think it's a really good time to be a woman in business.
I agree. And I think also, I mean, to your point, with just where things are in society and I think the world, it's really great to be alive at this time, to see some of the progress that's being made. I think you were alluding to, and quite frankly, just point out that there's some glass ceilings that have, been there. And it's great to see those things being broken because we really need the contributions of everyone, especially women. So excited that we can have this interview during Women's History Month. And, I think to that point, you're making some history on your own, in your own right. So I think that's pretty cool as well. So talk to me a little bit about the course that you are rolling out, creating psychological safety.
Yeah, well, the name of my business is Harmony in the Workplace, and that's what I'm so passionate about, is helping stressed out business owners who don't really know where to start, create and address psychological safety in the workplace. It's been proven to be the number one factor in building effective teams. Google did Project Aristotle, and they started the study in 2012. And what they did was they set out to determine what it was that made some of the teams within the Google empire perform really well, while others were lagging and they weren't doing as well. So a very industrious team set out to find out why, what was happening. And they looked at demographics, and they looked at ethnicity, and they looked at culture, and they looked at location, and they looked at leadership, and they couldn't figure it out. It took them 2 years. It was 2014 before they finally connected all the dots that psychological safety was the number one factor in creating effective teams. So what is psychological safety? Psychological safety is a level of trust in the workplace, in taking interpersonal risk, in expressing ideas, thoughts, opinions. Every voice at the table matters, which we talk about in diversity and inclusion.
Right.
And and you know what? It's proven to be the number one factor, because if people don't feel free and authentic to be authentic, free to be authentic in the workplace and bring their whole selves to work and contribute in a meaningful way, then they're holding back, which means that the organization is held back. It means near misses won't be reported. Accidents and mistakes won't be reported when there's no one watching. And efficiencies can't be improved, and innovation, just isn't there. So what they found out with the Google study is that it doesn't matter about any of the other team building exercises. If psychological safety is not in place and people don't feel safe to take that level of interpersonal risk, and there's trust, nothing else matters.
Wow. So Project Aristotle. And so that's very interesting because I think by default, and it's just my opinion on it, I think a lot of times people are quick to look at the physical in terms of workplace safety and so forth. But it sounds like what you're really focused upon is beyond just the physical safety. It's what's happening to someone that they're not even talking about because they're not feeling as if they can really bring their full self to work, because they don't. It sounds like they don't feel like they're going to be accepted if they were to do so. If a company is lacking in that regard, what do you think about that?
Well, you're right in that it takes the whole fit for duty from just the physical. We're not drinking, we're not drugging, we're not coming to work impaired. We're not operating machinery under the influence or anything like that. It takes that whole fit for duty piece and looks at it from a psychological perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the way that shows up in the workplaces is increased absenteeism. People just aren't able to come to work because they're struggling. Increased presenteeism, which from a health and safety standpoint is even more scary, because that means the bum is in the seat, the person is there in their job, but their mind is completely disconnected. They're
Wow.
not they're not present. So you can imagine that you can get away with that for a while at a desk job, working a desk job until it shows up in your productivity or lack of productivity. But imagine how that works, how that looks someone operating a piece of heavy equipment or
Mm,
driving a big rig or, even being a first responder, right? When their mind is so preoccupied with what's happening, either they're being, I deal a lot with workplace bullying and sexual harassment and that type of thing. So they might be experiencing presenteeism because of abuse they're suffering at work. They might be suffering presenteeism because of, some mental health struggles that are happening right now in these times of disruption where, everything is disrupted, and mental health, we're talking about it more than ever, right? Which is not a bad thing. We've been working to
right.
break down those barriers for a long time. But yeah, definitely from a health and safety perspective around that fit for duty piece, it's a big thing that employers are starting to pay a lot more attention to.
And as you were just speaking about that, you talked about the fit for duty, and I can't help but to talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak, in terms of the fit for duty, and I've been looking at what has been the impact of COVID-19 on the workforce, and in terms of that the psychological safety, the psyche of the employees. Some that have had to work and I guess in person, they weren't able to have some of those measures that others had in terms of being able to shift and work from home. So I'm just wondering how you've seen that impact show up in the workplace in your work.
It's huge. We experts estimate that the mental health fallout and effect from COVID-19 is going to last 2 to 5 years and beyond for some. Some people, I like to say that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same. We're not all in the same boat. Some people
Right.
right now, they're living their best life. They're
Hmm.
working from home. They're avoiding the commute. They don't have to spend money on wardrobe or parking or meals out. Their income has not been disrupted at all. They're not able to spend on trips or anything that they may otherwise have been used to spending money on. So they're renovating their homes, and they're spending money where they can right now. With we're limited. I'm in Canada, so I'm thinking it might be somewhat different statistically,
Uh-huh.
but very similar socially, right?
Hmm.
Um, and other people have lost everything.
Yeah.
They've lost their businesses that they've put blood, sweat, tears, and years of invested time into. Those people are not going to recover anytime soon. They need that compassion and that support. And people in the workplace, we need to be empathetic. As business leaders, we need to be empathetic about how people may be processing things. And there's no right or wrong feelings. Nobody ever has the right to tell you what you're feeling is wrong or bad. So if someone says they're struggling, find out, be intentional about doing check-ins, those types of things. I know in Canada, 500,000 people, and I mean, our population is much, much smaller, but
Sure.
500,000 people a week are missing work due to mental health implications. It's a
Wow.
cost to the Canadian economy of $50 billion a year. Um, Prior to the pandemic, 2 out of 10 employees reported needing supports for their mental health. In the midst of the pandemic, 8 out of 10 have reported needing supports for their mental health. And I
My
would
goodness.
imagine the US statistics are very, very similar. And
Sure.
despite all that support people say they need, only 1 out of 3 HR people feel that they have the training to support people going through that. So we're really in a time of transition. And although I despise the term soft services for the kind of work that I do, because it has
Right.
such a hard line on a hard effect on the bottom line, they're really getting a lot of attention right now. And it's something that employers are paying attention to.
Got it. Got it. And so, as I'm thinking about it, I think for the longest time there's been a stigma in regard to mental health, and so it's two things. I heard you mention earlier workplace bullying, and so certainly something that we want to talk about. But then the second part of that is talking about some of the resources that people are starting to use now, some on their own, and then also what it is that employers are doing to support mental health. So, in terms of workplace bullying, why is that something that I guess resonates with you as something that should be addressed? I guess at the forefront, made a priority for people. What would you say to that?
Well, my personal story, I don't know if I shared this with you, Josh, is that I was bullied out of my previous employment. I found myself unexpectedly unemployed in 2015, having been bullied out of a new position where I came in with a team that had been longstanding.
Right.
There was a peer director who just decided she didn't trust me. She didn't like me. She never got to know me, and she made lots of assumptions about me.
Hmm.
And the type of bullying I experienced was covert behind closed doors bullying. There's a whole bunch of different types of bullying.
Right.
There's the raging bull who just bullies everybody. It's just who they are. They're just an angry person. And then there's the covert type of bullying. Puppeteer bullying is when a boss or a leader will instruct others in the team to pick a target and kind of gang up on that target.
Wow.
Mobbing is when a group of workers pull together to target an individual. There's different ways it can play out, even just giving someone the wrong meeting time, or starting rumors, telling lies, not giving someone the information they need to do their job. These are all really subtle ways that people can mistreat each other in the workplace, and it is rampant. It
Yeah.
happens everywhere all the time. Again, in Canada, 45% of Canadian workers report being bullied on the job every week. So 45% every week. So this is a big issue. And I know it's even more so in the States, at least as much, because
Hmm.
we actually have laws and legislation to protect us in the workplace from bullying.
Right.
And it's still, that's what's happening because there's no accountability.
Yeah. And I think so. First, let me just say I'm sorry that you dealt with that. Early in the I guess in the 2000s, mid 2000s, I found myself in a similar situation, and really, like you mentioned, being bullied out of a job. I was actually let go from a job, fired from a job after complaining about the type of treatment that I was receiving, and namely right around the time period where unfortunately my wife and I we lost a child. Wife and I suffered a miscarriage, and it was just a very traumatic experience. And so you would think that for an employer that people would be more empathetic around that, but that just was not my experience in that way. So I see a clear correlation to the psychological safety aspect, because that impacts someone's ability to work when they have had a traumatic experience that has happened. Just from a humanistic standpoint, you would expect that people could really join and be supportive, but that's not the case. And I'm hearing you talk about the statistics there in Canada. 45%, that is a huge number, that's dealing with that on a weekly basis. I mean, that just should not be. That should not be. So I'm sorry to hear that. But what resources do you think that if someone was dealing with that right now, they're listening to us speak, what resources do they have available to them that maybe they don't know? What would you say?
Well, in the US, there are lots of people working in this field. There's a workplace bullying institute in the US with some wonderful people doing some wonderful work.
Hmm.
The first thing I want to say is I'm sorry that happened to you, Josh. You know, it really comes down to organizational culture and what's
Right.
happening in that and when that's tolerated. A lot of times, bystander bullies or bystanders will just um, put up with the toxic status quo because they don't want to be the target.
Yeah.
So to make just as an aside here before I get into more resources, uh,
Sure.
to make you feel better, it's usually workplace bullies don't pick the same targets that schoolyard bullies do. They're not
Okay.
seen as weak. They're not seen as unable to defend themselves. They're usually strong. They're usually like you were, willing to challenge the status quo if it's toxic and stand
Mhm.
up for themselves and their workers. And what will happen is eventually, like you said, you got let go when you did that. And eventually, what they'll do is they'll end up with a whole lot of people who are willing to tolerate that low bar, and they will not innovate and they will not grow. And if that's what management wants, that's what management wants.
Yeah.
But today's workers demand more. So the next thing I want to say, if there's anyone right now that's experiencing workplace abuse, either sexual harassment, workplace bullying, psychological damage from that, it is awful. There's shame that it's happening. It's unwarranted and undeserved. It's
Right.
very isolating. People feel they feel alone. They feel like there's nowhere for them to turn. So, I mean, I'm going to share my contact information. Always reach out to me. I'm an international trainer and speaker, so I'm happy to help support anyone that's going through that. I know how isolating it can be.
Yeah.
When you're losing sleep and you can't eat. And for me, it showed up as disease in my body.
Mm.
What was happening in my mind, and I just want them to know they're not alone. And there are resources available. So, check out your local legislation, first of all. Like I'm not up on all the legislation in all the
Sure.
states, obviously, but check your occupational health and safety, if that's what it's called there. See, what the laws are around that. Check your human rights legislation in your area and, educate yourself, be empowered.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people suffer in silence, unfortunately, because you think, oh, well, I'm the only person that's ever dealt with that. And just like we're having this conversation right now, I remember after having that experience, actually, I felt, even though nobody wants to be fired or let go from a job, right? But afterwards, I actually felt better than I did because literally, Ruthann, as I would be driving to work, I mean, I would start off my day feeling great. The closer I got to work, I started to feel like sick, driving into work. And it was just like, man, this is not good, in that sense. And, I felt like I did the right thing. I spoke to my supervisor about the issue and how I was feeling, spoke to HR. And in that instance, just I never felt supported, in that sense. In fact, it was kind of like, how dare you? Why would you want to bring something like this up? And try to change, the situation. I found that to be very surprising. But I say all that to say that others, just like you're sharing your story, have shared with me that they had similar instances, and I say, wow, okay, I didn't know the statistics behind it, but I said there's a lot of people that's dealing with this.
There really are. And that your story resonates with me so much. Like I said, I became physically ill. I have ulcerative colitis, and I would be relatively healthy in the morning.
Yeah.
And by the afternoon, I was sick. So when
Wow.
I got let go from that job, I was devastated because I had left a job at a smaller organization to grow into this new organization.
Hmm.
Was never given that opportunity, but so I was devastated because it happened, and my career felt like it was in a shambles. But I experienced that ultimate sense of relief because I knew I knew I was in a toxic place. I knew I didn't fit in. I kept trying to think my way out of it and figure out what to do. But yeah, I was very relieved because then your hand is forced. You're forced to make a change,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, for sharing that. And I'm sure someone listening, just based off of the statistics that you shared earlier, that somebody listening has dealt with or unfortunately may be going through. But I also just want to say that there's light at the end of the tunnel, even in the midst of a situation like that. You're right. It forces your hand. Sometimes you have to make a pivot to a whole different situation. But I can say for me, had I stayed in that place, I know I wouldn't be as happy as I am, right now with my career and, business opportunities and so forth like that. I certainly wouldn't have signed up for it, Ruthann, but it ended up being a blessing in disguise because, that allowed me to relate to people in a way that I just, I could have empathized, but experiencing it is something totally different, quite frankly. So yeah, that's what I would say as well. So, let me just go ahead and share your website is harmonyintheworkplace.com. I almost feel like it's somewhat self-explanatory based off of what it is that you've been sharing, in our conversation. But I just love that name because people who wouldn't want to experience harmony in the workplace.
Yeah, thank you. And that's when everything's working together, right? You've got psychological safety in place. There's a zero tolerance for workplace abuse. People bring their best selves to work. Everybody's working towards a shared vision that's well communicated throughout the organization. They know where they stand in the team to help bring that vision to fruition. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I'm also just thinking about how, workplaces that I've been in, a lot of times when people are being promoted, right? They're being promoted because maybe they started an entry level role, they did a great job, right? And so entry level training seems to get a lot of the resources, right? You want to make sure that people have that initial OJT, on a job training. The executives, they get training, but it seems like middle management doesn't really get that same level of attention. And in my estimation, I think that's where we're having a lot of the issues because people may have performed well in those other roles, but now when they're getting into management and they're actually having to interact with people, they need a different set of training or just exposure in order to cultivate a workplace environment, culture that's going to be conducive for people to feel that psychological safety. Has that been your experience? Do you see that in your line of work?
Absolutely. There's a difference between management and leadership. Managers enforce rules. They create, they create schedules. They do the budgeting and all of that kind of thing. But leaders create vision. John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And
Wow.
when we're promoting people into leadership positions just because they've got tenure, that's not going to work. That's actually the halo effect bias coming into play because someone might be a good employee. They might be a great employee. They might be well liked. They might be a great worker. That doesn't mean they're a good people manager or a leader. So we can't make assumptions about people. We talk in the Canadian Mental Health Commission of Canada has put 13 psychosocial factors connected those with levels of psychological safety, and making sure that the right person is in the right job is a big part of that. You don't want to put an introvert making cold calls, for example.
Right.
And so that's a function of HR to make sure that the right person has the right psychological makeup to do the work that's required of the position you're putting them in. And it's just about that whole strategy piece, right? Not just looking at the empty seats and who's next in line, but really considering the whole employee holistically. Like I talk about holistic human resource management. And it's really something to pay attention to.
So you mentioned HR, and as you brought up HR, because of COVID, we've seen a lot of changes over this last year. I think the biggest change is the amount of people that are working remotely. I believe that before COVID, there were some that were in management roles, senior leadership roles in some organizations that I think, whether they said it or not, I got the feeling that they felt like people that worked remotely, they were not really working, okay, before them. But I think that statistics have shown that people actually being remote, they've been just as productive, if not more productive, being remote. So I think that was very telling. Along those lines, put you on the spot just a little bit here. What would you say are maybe 2 to 3 trends that you're seeing happen in the HR world that may continue over these next 3 to 5 years? If you had to just give a few trends, what would you say?
The workplace will never be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what you said. We've been able to see that people working from home are as productive, if not more productive. So why would business spend, tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars renting offices when
Mm-hmm.
they can pare down and have their workforce work remotely? And I think the other thing we're going to see is we're going to see a hybrid model.
Okay.
There's going to be some workers that, there are some people, we're all different, right? Just a little aside,
Yeah.
I'm a bit of an introvert, and I'm loving being able to reach the world from my home office. I mean,
Okay.
as a corporate trainer that was going out to businesses and delivering my training, and this has expanded my reach. I mean, look at us, Josh. We're talking right
Right.
now. Would we be talking without COVID? Maybe not. I don't know.
Right.
But it's expanded that reach. It's really shrunk the planet in a lot of ways. So I think we're going to see a hybrid model. Some people, introverts, might want to go into the office once a week just to maintain connections. There's going to be some that don't want to go at all. Maybe they don't even like people at all. Who knows?
Right.
And there's going to be some that can't wait to get out of their house. They want to go in 5 days a week. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be more kind of common working areas in the workplace of the future, where we can scale back on office space, but have more common areas where people can come and go and connect. I hope we're going to see an increase in intentional check-ins with the remote workforce, and just being intentional about, maintaining that culture of trust, or building that culture of trust, and doing check-ins, mental health check-ins, because we know people are struggling. Whether you call it mental health check-in or not, there's going to be some that are just really uncomfortable with that term. So you call those stress and burnout check-ins, whatever resonates, right? But it's all kind of the same thing as far as being intentional about that. And yeah, HR is changing. And I think human resource managers have been phenomenal throughout this. I mean, they've had to be so resilient and keeping on top of all the legislative changes and everything that's happening. And I'm in some Facebook groups with they have they have HR all around the world, and there's a lot of back and forth there about how to maintain that connection and build trust with teams, and even do employee appreciation through distance and that type of thing. So HR is resilient. They'll continue to pivot. People are the most important asset for any organization. And I think there's a lot of employers and leaders that really, really want to support their people in practical and tangible ways. And they might need some help to show them how. But I absolutely believe that most employers want to do right by their workforce.
Yeah. So I guess we could say we heard it here first from you saying that within the next 3 to 5 years, a few trends that we're going to be looking for. So we'll look back on this. And the first thing that you said is the hybrid model. So I agree with you with the hybrid model. Also understanding the fact that the workplace will never be the same. And again, I agree with that, too. And then, I really, love that you pointed out the intentional check-ins. It's going to be different, right? When people are remote versus when you see someone in person, and maybe they are sitting at their desk, they're a little bit more quiet. They just are different. You can see that in person, but when you're remote, you don't have that type of interaction unless we're kind of on camera, right? And in that sense, so I think it's very important that jobs, that supervisors and so forth, and then even your colleagues, that we're checking in on each other. So with that, let me just shift very quickly because I know that you have an exciting event that is coming up in May. If you would just go ahead and tell us about this exciting event that you have.
Josh, I'm feeling really led strongly to share one more thing first, and it might help keep someone safe. We are on camera, right? This interview will be on camera,
Yes.
not just verbal. Okay,
Mhm.
so this is a signal that someone is crying for help. A
Mm.
lot of times people aren't safe at home. So if you're ever in a meeting, and I don't know how widely shared this is. I've shared it on my LinkedIn profile a couple of times. It's directly related to domestic abuse
Okay.
because people are more cloistered now in their homes. But if you see this, anyone do this in a meeting, call 911 because that's a cry for help.
Got it.
So I wanted to share that because
Thank
I
you.
just felt that it was important to share. So yeah, I've got a couple of things going on right now. I've launched my program
Mhm.
online, as everybody else in 2020 had to pivot
Right.
everything online. So I'm actually building Harmony Training Academy, and I've got my first course up. It's creating psychological safety. You can find the link for that on my website, right on the homepage.
Mhm.
And I've got an exciting event coming up at the end of May. It's understanding workplace psychological safety symposium, critical conversations. So we're really getting into how to connect, support, and build trust in the world of work. And we have 6 dynamic speakers. It's a short event. It's running 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I've been told people don't want to be online all day. So we're gonna run through that, but provide some great content and help people connect and build more trust within their workplace. And
Oh,
that is on the events tab on my website. So yeah,
great.
www.harmonyintheworkplace.com. You can find everything there.
That is it. So that's wonderful, wonderful. So definitely looking forward to that. Did you have a date for that just yet? I
Oh
think
yes,
in May.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's May 27th. Thanks,
May
Josh.
27th. Okay, no
Yeah.
problem. So just make a note of that, and we'll put that in the notes as well.
Yeah,
So
not too many people know yet, but we're going to hold
Mhm.
another one in the fall.
Okay. So
And
again, we're getting breaking news. So something else that's being heard here first. So thank you for sharing that information. So with that, Ruthann, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this information. I know for myself that this was very helpful, and I'm glad that you shared that signal. That if someone is on camera, they're putting their hand up, and I think, yeah, there you go. That's it. That's a cry for help, and that people that are seeing it, they should call 911 immediately and get some support for that individual. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. But this has been a great talk, and looking forward to the great things that you're going to continue to do, and look forward to catching up again and getting some updates on what's happening for you. So with that, thank you for joining us.
yeah, thanks for having me, Josh. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to staying in your tribe and staying connected.
Same here. Same here.